What did you learn about the psychology of people in college that you see played out in your work?
You know, it's a good question. I think every day you see it in a different way. It's hard to summarize it in a very short, brief discussion here, but it's amazing the wonderful things people can do. We see some people do just amazing, wonderful things. They stop to help citizens. They stop to help police officers. We had a gentleman last week who I would consider a hero. One of our officers was struggling with an individual, and he stopped with no regard to his own safety and helped the officer secure the situation. So you see the good things in people, and you like to focus on that. But you also see the dark side. And the training in psychology helps you understand a little bit better, if that's possible, why people do terrible things. And sometimes you really don't quite understand it, but there's underlying factors, maybe mental health, maybe some other things. So it gives you a perspective to think beyond just what you would normally think about one individual or one circumstances.
Has that changed over the years? Has what you've seen in terms of sort of common behaviors, and in this case, I mean, you hate to focus on the negative. I'm totally with you. Every day we see as much positive as negative, and yet to try to understand at a level of empathy that our neighbors or neighbors' children or our children or family or whomever is struggling, to understand that at a level that goes beyond they're a bad guy. Has that evolved over the years? And if it has, do you see any connections to society or policy? Or
if I understand your question, have I seen it change over the years? That's a very good question. I think one of the challenges being in the law enforcement profession is you see bad things every day. So it's hard over a 25-year career to say, well, it's worse today than it was, because you see it so consistently over time.
Yeah, it's your job.
Yeah, so I think there's always that element. There's consistent, that's why they need law enforcement and they need public safety, because you're always going to have those things. So to say it's more or less, I'm not sure that I can really quantify it, but I can say it's consistent.
What about cops? What about the psychology of a cop? What is the psychology? And isn't that horrible? There is no such thing as a perfect stereotype, and I just reject that. And yet, is there a psychology that sort of you see, and has there been changes in the way cops approach their work over the years? And again, I know that can be
That's
tricky.
a great question. I think so. I think well, I'll say this. I learn every day I come to work. One of my chiefs, Dave Farrington, awesome chief, a good role model for me, once told me when I was a young officer and he was a captain and then eventually a chief, he said, I come to work every day and I learn something new. And I thought, for somebody who'd been there 25 years to say that,
how could that be?
How could that be? Now, 20, 25 years later, I understand what he's talking about. There have been a lot of changes in law enforcement. I think we understand better now than we have ever before that what we do does impact us at our home, our own psyche. I think we're better trained to recognize some of those. We have better systems in place for officers to reach out for assistance when they're hurting or they're confused. Or the job you don't leave the job in the office, unfortunately. So we're not perfect, but we're starting to recognize our humanity, if you will. And so things that we may be willing or able to talk about now, we may not have talked about 20 years ago. So we've evolved to recognize that we're not bulletproof, and so we need to take care of one another.
Is that liberating in a way for officers to? I mean, the idea of being the perfect professional, we all sometimes struggle with that. You want to be perfect, and when you're wearing a uniform, there is also this external expectation that you're perfect or that you are, above the law, and hopefully all are, and yet. Maybe that's the wrong way of putting it, but more so that you're so more contained or controlled in your own personal. Is it helpful for cops to be able to say, yeah, I'm a human?
I think so. Again, I can't speak for all police officers, but I can speak for myself and a majority of the officers that I know. I think there is some sense of liberation to say, hey, you're normal, and the things that are bugging you, that's okay. And you have to remember, in the law enforcement business, you change throughout your life. How you view your life at 22 or 23 as a cop, it's much different than you do at 40, and you have much more experience.
And we were talking about this before you and I talked, so tell me about that. So you know, I have this vision that an officer comes in very idealistic with some of the stories perhaps that you had in your childhood, or very different ones maybe, and yet comes in with this ideal of really obviously wanting to help and wanting to be in a position of authority where they can help. But
that's a good question. I think most cops will tell you, why do you want to get in the profession? You want to help people. And
so it's not that they want to play with guns.
No.
Right,
a lot of cops, some do probably.
Okay, fair enough.
A lot of them are fascinated by that and the gear, the stuff, and everything, the toys you get to have, and the costume you get to wear. It's great stuff. But yeah, majority of them get into it because they care about people. They do want to make a difference. And some realize quickly that you need to have realistic expectations of what you can change or what you can't change. And I know there's ideas that cops get into. They think they're going to change the world. I don't know if that's necessarily true for the vast majority of them. I think most of them realize they want to change what they can each day during their shift. So they're out there at small portions of the day doing the best job they can.
Right.
Again, it's hard to measure that change and that positive difference. But if you get into it thinking you're going to change the world, you will end up extremely frustrated and probably not the ideal profession for you. Because a lot of people don't want our help.